If it works, it will be the
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Jeff Swinger. I'm fairly new to Ponte Vedra, about a year and a half, so I feel really new, actually. But I've been here a year and a half. Moved here from Park City, Utah, where I lived for about 10 years. So quite a difference, living at 6,500 feet to sea level, basically. I have spent my whole adult life as a working photographer, so I've been very fortunate. I have, my background is in newspapers and then into wire services, so AP, Getty, USA Today, wire service, so on the sports side and some news. So my background is news and sports. And currently, for I guess about the last 5 years, I've been teaching photography workshops, doing some one-on-one instruction, but I've found a new passion. And you know, as you go as a working photographer for as many years as I've been doing it, you kind of have to reinvent the wheel every so often and try something new. So I've never considered myself a landscape photographer. When I moved to Utah, that was pretty much everyone I spoke to was a landscape photographer or a wedding photographer, and it kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like I felt like I had to be a landscape guy, you know. And since this picture's up there, that's kind of why I just kind of segued into that for a second. So when I found the wild horses out in the desert, it kind of gave me that opportunity to explore landscape with moving subjects. So that's kind of another subject. But creative devices. Does anybody know what a creative device is? Could you guess? Camera? Well, it's a device for sure. When I was in college, I went to Ohio University. They have a top-notch visual communications department. Probably photo 101, black and white 101, whatever class that was. My professor handed me a paper along with the rest of the class and said, here is your list of creative devices. And I've kind of used that list over the years in my career to help me get through some really lousy assignments and some really great assignments. And I currently use it all the time, mentally. I am not a super creative photographer. I feel like I really have to work at it, whereas you might look at someone and say, man, that person just gets it. It's so instant for them, all the creativity that goes into that image. So sometimes I need the help with a list. And when I was working at the newspaper and I would work 5 days a week, shoot anywhere from 2 to 5 assignments a day, it got really tough to come up with some creative ideas at a really lousy assignment. And I'm driving to the assignment and they say, oh, by the way, this is the Metro cover today, so make it good. And it's, you know, Mr. Big sitting behind a desk. And you go, what the hell am I going to do with this guy, you know? Because I've done this same picture 5 times this week. So in that list, I tend to say, all right, what can I do to make this interesting? All right, there's a glass desk maybe, there's a sheet of glass, there's stainless steel, there's a plate glass window, or the sun's coming in from behind them, you know, maybe I can silhouette them. So that leads me to telling you what creative devices are in my mind and my professor who gave me this years and years ago. So before I get into that, can we play that little video? Sure. Actually, can we turn this down a little bit? Yeah. I'm going to play a short video for you. It's probably 2 minutes. It will give you an idea of what my background is, except for the news side. So my specialty and my passion has always been sports photography. So this is kind of going to wake you up a little bit, and then we'll get into the creative devices. But once you see this and we talk about creative devices, you can start seeing some of those devices within my sports images. So we're not just talking about stop action. there are other things that you might spot once we go through some creative devices. So,
Okay. It'll take us just a second.
yeah, it's no problem. And by the way, this is kind of cool because this is the first time I've been in front of a group since before COVID in a speaking environment. So, pretty cool. Sorry if I threw you a curveball there. Thank you. So I show that just to kind of give you an idea of what my background is. I've done a lot of news, a lot of features, food assignments. You know, when you're a newspaper photographer, you have to do a little bit of everything. Portraits, you know, you're working for every section that you would see in an old-fashioned newspaper. They've changed a little bit since then. But my passion has always been sports. So when I moved from Cincinnati to Utah to be with my wife and became self-employed and had to freelance, most of my work turned into just sports. And then it turned into my workshops and teaching and that kind of thing. So I've done 4 Olympics, Pan Am Games, World Cup skiing, as you've seen. That was something new to me, moving to Utah. Kentucky Derbies, Indy 500s, you know, pretty much all the major events. So a little bit of adrenaline junkie, like that stuff when it comes to me not having to do the racing and all that other thing. So let's get into some creative devices. Let's see, which buttons are we talking about? Up and down? Okay. Okay. Yep, all right. So when I talk about creative devices, actually it looks like something squeezed there. Something happened to it. Anyway, it's fine. Yeah, it's kind of squeezed. It looks like it's,
Yeah, it's,
okay. Well, there's only a couple pages with that. Hopefully the rest of it's fine. All right, so creative devices, stop action, which you saw a ton of that. If you're going to go into like a photography class, what they're going to do, once you're past all the basics, like your exposure triangle and all that stuff that you've all heard about, you're going to go into, all right, how do I stop action? And then it's going to be, how do I show motion? How do I pan? Depth of field can be a creative device. You know, a lot of depth of field, lack of depth of field, compression. Leading lines is something that you guys probably talk a lot about when you're doing your images and your contests, and perspective, dominant foreground, contributing background. You know, I'm going on and on. They're not all listed here, but silhouette, starburst. These are all creative devices that you can use when you go into a situation. So when I hop out of the truck and I'm going to a spot and I try and come up with one, composition, two, what am I going to do with this composition? Do I stand here with the light behind me, or do I backlight something? You know, like these horses in particular, I knew what I wanted. I want to shoot backlit. I want the intense color of the desert. This is in Utah. And I got really lucky that there was some action. So 2 creative devices at least. Actually, you know, so you've got backlight, silhouette, action. Anytime you can, see if we're going the right direction.
I don't think it works. He's got it.
try to, there you go.
Okay. So, yeah, it's kind of squeezed this whole thing a little bit. I don't know why. But anyway, it's fine. You can read them. So stop action. And we're not going to get into all the particulars of stop action other than, you know, fast enough shutter speed to stop action. With the new digital cameras, I tend to not go below 12/50th of a second. I shoot a lot at 1600. I feel like it's fast enough to stop most running sports. The skiing, obviously, it's a much faster shutter speed because they're doing 85 miles an hour around bends. So stopping action revolves around having a fast enough shutter speed. So when you go into a situation and you're like, what am I trying to get out of this? What does my client need? What do I want personally, whether it's your kids or your grandkids or whoever you're photographing, could be a soccer game. You just have to know that I need a fast enough shutter speed if I want to stop action. So it's pretty standard protocol, but it's also a creative device because the next one might be panning. And feel free to ask questions because I'm just going to cruise through this. It'll be over before you know it, and I would like this to be interactive. So I'm happy to answer any question about any one of these, or if you have some situation you've come up against that you don't know how to solve. So your stop action, it's all the standard stuff. And as you go through this and we talk about these devices, the more devices you can put in one image, the more interesting the image is going to be, right? Like the top right, stop action, silhouette, framing, right? Done purposefully. Like that was something that, I didn't care who the skier was at that point, but I was looking for, the moon was lined up. I was looking for that specifically, and I, happened to get lucky. So you've got at least 3 creative devices in an image, which makes it maybe more interesting than, the bottom right one or the top left one. But the top left, you got stop action, you got backlight, you know, you've long lens compression, that's shot with an 800 millimeter lens, I think, 700, so it was a 600 millimeter lens with a converter. But these are all things that I do purposefully. Now sometimes I am a lazy photographer. I shoot almost all the time on shutter priority, auto ISO, auto white balance, keep it simple, stupid. You know, that way I know what my camera's doing. I use exposure compensation an awful lot. You can't really tell on these, but you know, on almost all the images as they go through, you'll see either a plus or a minus in exposure compensation. It's because I'm shooting in shutter priority and I'm dialing my exposure compensation as I'm going. So that's just a technical note. So panning, you know, and it's really easy to explain panning. If you look at your hand and you move your hand, but you see the background moving, you know, like I do that, that's how I explain panning. I am photographing my hand and I am visually seeing the background totally blurred out. To do that, you need a slow shutter speed, so you're not stopping the action. You are trying to get something sharp, so it's got to be just fast enough to get an eyeball sharp or a face. So if you're looking at any one of these, her face is sharp, the pony's face is sharp, they're sharp, the face on the bulls are sharp. So I like a little something that's sharp in the image, or you can go totally extreme, which I don't have anything here where you're doing like 1/8 of a second and nothing is sharp except you just have a pretty painted image. I know a lot of people will do super slow with in-camera movement, you know, of the seascapes and whatnot, but so panning, creative device. It helps me, I don't do a lot of it. For my clients, I think it's silly to, you know, at times to do some really panned images because it's not what the publications are going to use. They're going to use the stop action, something sharp. But in almost every set of images, you might have one panned image that I throw in there if I'm successful, because it's not always, I'm not always successful at it. Yes?
I'm curious about the skater that was used F14 on that.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, because it's 5,000 ISO, so it was when you're shooting action and there's a lot of things going on, especially in speed skating. In short track, they're not the only one on the track. There's a bunch of them. So I am probably in that situation trying to go from stop action to panning in the same race, on the same backstretch, you know, doing it quickly. So that one's done at 60th of a second at F14 at 5,000 ISO. To not be at F14, I would have to drop my ISO way down to like 200 or something, and then I could be at F4 or 2.8. Now there are tricks to do that in a lot of the cameras to do it quickly, but in this situation, I'm not in shutter priority. I'm in on a manual because I'm indoors and the light doesn't change on me. So that is when I will shoot fully manual. You know, I probably set my white balance in there. So every image looks exactly the same as far as my white balance and all that. But that's a good question, though. Again, here, this was shutter priority and auto ISO, but to, you know, to get a little movement in the image, I had to drop it down. You know, this one's 40th of a second. They're not going very fast. I just wanted some motion in the image, but I wanted my subject sharp, so it automatically is at, you know, broad daylight at ISO 100 at apertures f11. So, and that's really just because of shutter priority, you know, auto ISO. So here we have the next version of action, you know, where we had stop action, panning, Now my creative device is motion. And I like to put motion in images to create a feeling. This way, there's some tension, there's whatever the feeling you're looking for, but it's, in all of these, I wanted the busyness of a market in Vietnam, or this cute little girl who's sitting there in her mom's cafe, you know, the action of all the scooter traffic that keeps going past. Down here with the fishermen, actually the ladies who were on the docks in Vietnam, they weren't moving super fast, but I wanted to try and show what I was hearing and feeling. And in that moment, there's cack, 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 cack. You know, they're all just chirping at each other, they're yelling at each other, they're counting money, they're writing down, you know, the men are dropping all the fish down, the women are counting, and they're literally in charge. But I wanted that feeling of some tension. So truly, I was doing this purposefully. It wasn't on mistake. It wasn't because it was dark, where I just happened to get a slow, you know, motion in the fish as they're dumping. I was doing that specifically. So even at 2/50th of a second, you still get some motion. I didn't want to go too slow because they were all moving around. I did want the ladies sharp. So think about it when you're out, you know, shooting an assignment or for yourself, your own assignment, and you're going, boy, it looks a little boring when they're all just frozen in time. You know, you have to think about that when you're photographing a helicopter. You know, a helicopter in the sky with the propellers stopped looks like a, you know, just looks ridiculous, right? So you have to think about it and slow the shutter speed down enough to get motion in the propellers. Auto racing, you have to shoot, you think, oh my God, they're doing 200 miles an hour, you got to shoot it at a really fast shutter speed. Well, you don't. You want to stop the action, but you want enough motion in the tires so they don't look like they're sitting still on the track, right? So things like that. Could be, you know, birds in flight. You want a little bit of motion in the wings if you're lucky enough to get their head, you know, sharp. And when I shoot birds in flight, I don't photograph birds much. When I do, there are times, you know, when they're floating and their wings are out, it's all going to be sharp no matter what. But when they're coming in for a landing or they're getting ready to take off, as long as you can get one shot in there with their head frozen and some wings movement, you know, it just has more tension in the image, has a little bit more creativity in the image, and it just gives you a little bit of a feeling that that bird's moving pretty good, you know. So all done with intention. None of this was by accident. Same thing with the lady washing her hair in at the water temple. I slowed it down just enough to get some movement in the water. Now I have her, the same image of her doing that, and I'm doing it quickly where the water's frozen. You know, it's totally stopped. But the feeling that I was getting while I was watching her do this and photographing her, I wanted that, the feeling of movement because there's water moving all around us. I don't know if you know anything about Bali, but the water temple's pretty cool place to go. This was kind of a private little water temple that we found where not many tourists go. And she full on was bathing, and then she did her prayers and her purification ceremony. So it's just a really peaceful location, but I just wanted a little bit of movement in there. So when you're doing landscape, same thing. You think about what you want to show, what feeling you want to get when you look at your image, and what feeling you want other people to get when they look at your image. And when you have some visual interest other than a pretty landscape, your eyes or your viewer's eyes stay on your image longer. You want people's eyes to stay on your image as long as possible, right? That's why there are certain things in composition that make sense when you think about it, you know, whether it's leading lines or composing an image where the edge is at the corner, because it kind of, you know, you kind of keeps your mind or your eyes within the image for longer than if it were just, you know, shooting you straight off your page and there was nothing other than a pretty waterfall. So that top left, I stacked neutral density filters, I think like a 10 and a 3 or a 10 and a 6, and shot a 30-second exposure to get the movement, not only in the water, but I wanted some movement in the clouds. Movement in the clouds are really hard to do, especially when it's a beautiful sunny day, so you have to use a neutral density filter. So that's a tool to go along with the creative device that I'm trying to, you know, it could have worked, it could not have worked. You know, it's all trial and error. First time I'd ever done it. This one is not, but it's a 15th of a second. So you can still get movement in water in broad daylight, and this water was really hauling. It was moving pretty quick, but you don't get the same movement in the sky. So, you know, I just challenge you to try, if you have some neutral density filters, to try doing something like that, where you stack them. So I had to compose, focus, and then put the filters in, because 10 stops in neutral density plus another 3 or 6 stops, you cannot see through your viewfinder. It's just fully dark. So it's like shooting in the dark. And then that was a nice surprise for me. And it even kind of gives you a nice little color shift in there. It just worked out. Same thing, you know, bottom left, that was in Iceland. Actually, all these are in Iceland. Standing on the cliff, the waves are just pounding. Like, I have never felt surf that strong in my life. So I wanted you to kind of, the viewer, to be able to feel that surf as well by looking at the image. You'll have to tell me if it gives you that feeling, you know, but having a little bit of movement at 50th of a second, you know, the rocks aren't moving, the mountain's not moving, but the water is. So it was intentional to try and get that, you know, spray and the movement in there. Now, I also, like I said, I have higher, faster shutter speed images, so the water stopped, but this to me gave me a more of a feeling that I was trying to get. And again, I don't consider myself a landscape photographer. I struggle with landscape. It's a work in progress. You know, I'm much more comfortable being on a football field and shooting action than I am when I go out and shoot landscape. It's just a much more natural thing for me. I feel like I'm progressing at it. And again, it's maybe over the last 5 years, so I haven't been doing it very long. But again, it's composition. You know, that's first off, composition, your exposure, and then trying to be creative with some of these creative devices. So, any questions? Yes?
So what is in your arsenal when you're doing sports photography, and what do you shoot with normally?
So, when it comes to cameras, I'm a Canon guy. I work for Canon. I'm a freelance pro market rep for them. So I've done that since 2008, where I go to events and I'm, you know, standing there at a counter with lots of camera gear, and people come up and want to check out all the new gear, the new lenses, all that stuff, so I can work across a counter with you, and which was a natural progression for me into doing photography workshops. My expertise is helping you figure out how to use your camera. So I shoot Canon. They're all good. Everybody makes great cameras. They're all excellent. So it doesn't matter whether or not you're using Canon, Nikon, Sony, Lumix, OM system. They're all awesome. But my bag, I only own 4 lenses. I have 2 cameras. I'm down to 2. Usually I have 3. But I only have 4 lenses, 15 to 35, 24 to 105, 70 to 200, and a 200 to 400. That's the big one. Would I like other ones? Sure. Do they make me money? Not necessarily. So, you know, I was concentrating on having the gear that's my moneymaker, you know, what I needed for sports. But I'm also able to call my friends at Canon and say, hey, can I borrow another couple camera bodies and a couple lenses so I can set up a remote for a big event that I'm doing, or, you know, just have an extra camera with me, or a specialty lens, which we'll get into, like prime lenses. I don't own any prime lenses. Do I want one? Yeah, the 85-1.4 is fantastic. It's gives you that super shallow depth of field, which I'll show you. The 135-1.8, I think it is I would buy one of those to give me a creative device, which would be the shallow depth of field. Otherwise, I can't really think of why I need a 185 or a 135 over my 70 to 200, unless I want to go super shallow depth of field. But most of the action that you saw in that was the long lens, 200 to 400. Some maybe a 400 2.8. A lot of the skiing was a 600 f4, the big giant ones. So yeah, so create a device, framing. You can use this in sports. You can use this in travel photography, and you can use it in landscape. And you know, all right, so the top left, it's not an awesome picture. I would have loved for the top of it to be dark as well, but this was at the last Players Championship. You know, shot through the middle of a tree. You can do the same thing through fans, you know, people standing on the sidelines. Top right, that was the net repair, the fishermen who bring the nets in and have to repair them, and I wanted to, so there you have framing, you have starburst, you have silhouette, you have multiple creative devices within one image to, you know, hopefully create a little bit of this dead tree, because everybody who has been to Monument Valley, which is Navajo Nation, has photographed the mittens. And, you know, there may be hundreds of people that shot this exact same thing, but there's fewer people that have shot this than standing there and shooting the mittens. So gave me a little bit of a, you know, a little bit more creativity on a day that the light was so-so. You know, over here we got the same thing. We got framing, we've got starburst, we've got silhouette, and it all just, and some reflection actually. So there's, you know, not the reflection as in a mirror or a puddle of water or something like that, but the light that's reflecting off the red rocks and hitting the bottom of Mesa Arch. Questions, anybody? Yes?
Upper left on the golf, and when I look at the lines in the grass, but I'm not sure how you got it.
Say it again, you like the lines in the grass?
The horizontal lines in the grass.
Yeah, that's how they mow the fairway, which also kind of added a little bit. I mean, they do such a nice job over there. It's every time you go to that golf course, it's like Technicolor, and you know, everything is really beautiful over there. The grounds crew is really pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, you got some lines that add some visual interest to it. You know, and again, when you're doing a golf tournament, you're 4 days of maybe following Rory around or the same, you're just like, all right, this is really repetitive. What else can I do? You know, so now I like repetition in my work. Like, I like multiple days of the same thing. It actually helps me focus, and it gives me an opportunity to try some different things, because it's really easy to plant roots That's why I tell people all the time, should I bring a tripod? Should I bring a tripod? Well, you don't need a tripod for most of these things. Like, Mesa Arch, won the tripod at, when people bring tripods to my wild horse workshop, and then they plan it, and they sit there with their long lens, and I watch them, and I'm like, okay, we've talked about this. You've now planted your tripod, and you haven't moved for 45 minutes. Why haven't you moved? Oh, I don't know. It's just, I'm really comfortable right here. All right, but the lights changed, the horses have moved. Your tripod has now planted roots, and you're not moving. So pick it up and move. So that's just kind of an easy way of telling people to, one, either don't use a tripod, or when you use a tripod, make sure you move around. It's really, it happens to me too. If I'm in a tripod and you set it down and you're like, all right, now what am I going to do? All right, well, I'll change my settings. I'm like, all right, maybe I'll put it lower, maybe I'll put it higher. And I'm like in the same 2-foot radius that I've been for the last 40 minutes. So move around, pick up your tripod, move it. It's really important, because even if you turn the other direction and see what's going on behind you, people forget, they set it down, they're into the moment, and they forget to even just look around, And one of the things that I tell people when we go on these kind of trips, stop shooting, take a look around, sit on a rock, take in the moment, not when the starburst, not when the sun's getting ready to poke through. That's not the time to do it. But there's plenty of time while you're out on any given day that you can just take it all in. And it's remarkable at the reactions that I get from participants when they finally do that. And I don't tell them what their reaction is going to be because everybody reacts differently. But in general, people come out in tears. They're like, I've never seen a sight like this, whether it is the horses or it is Mesa Arch or, it's a vista or something, because they're so used to closed-in spaces. They live in the city and they're amped up. They jump out of the truck. And they don't take in that moment. And it's really easy for me. I used to do this a lot, spot news. You get the call, your police radio's going off, you got blowing through, red lights, and you're amped up, and you just can't wait to get there, and you jump out, and you're like freaking out, and your hands are shaking, and they're sweaty, Same thing at a buzzer beater at the end of a game. You have to just take that moment, settle down, not go so fast, think about what's happening around you, try and slow your heart rate down. There's all kinds of tools that you can do to try and take yourself out of the moment a little bit so you don't screw up. Because when you're that amped up, you're going to screw up. You're going to forget to put a roll of film in your camera. You're going to forget to, in the old days, you're going to forget. It's going to happen, I promise you. So you just have to do that, and then also take in the moment while you're at an event, while you're at a beautiful location, golf tournament, whatever it might be. And you're going to be surprised at how much more you see photographically when you do slow down and you do take it in. So just a thought, keep in mind. Silhouette's a big one for me now, especially when going out to the desert and doing all these beautiful locations. This was my most recent trip out with a group to the Wild Horses. I knew specifically at sunset, like I said earlier, I really like to shoot it all backlit because it accentuates the colors of the desert. When the horses are moving, you can see the dust. That streak of dust happened to be a vehicle drove past on the dirt road, so it created a whole nother layer. For as many years as I've gone out to photograph these horses and have been there at sunset, this is the first time I've had the whole stampede of the herd running to the watering hole across me. I've always tried to position myself at the watering hole so they come at me, which is an incredible sight. But at sunset, as they ran past and silhouetted, I mean, we were all like freaking out. You know, even I was like, oh my God, you know, do this, make sure you're here, make sure you're focused on the horses in the foreground, make sure you're doing this, you know, just screaming out these things, and we're all freaking out. Make sure you have the mountains in the background so we can see where they are. So here, you've got silhouette, you've got, backlight, you've got stop action. It just creates a little bit more visual impact. And I do prefer sunset here as opposed to sunrise most of the one, because I don't really love getting up for sunrise too. You can find the horses in daylight, hang with them as long as you want until sunset. Yes?
These are beautiful.
Thank you.
And I always want to do silhouettes, but I know you don't have any settings here. And
Yeah.
my question is, how do you, what do you do? I mean, you just take some trial shots and dial it in, or do you have a sense of what settings you can put in?
So, okay, good question. One, I'm using a mirrorless camera, so it's cheating. I can see my exposure, right? Two, I know that I want to stop the action as they're running through, so I'm shooting it exactly how I was shooting the action in broad daylight. Shutter priority. Thumb on the dial for my exposure compensation. So I may have compensated down 2/3 of a stop, a full stop, maybe a stop and a third to get that. I want the blacks black, The other thing is that, so talking about the top ones. So I wanted to stop the action. But again, using a mirrorless camera and you're looking through, you can actually see your exposure so you know what you're getting. I also cheated a little bit in that at sunset, a lot of times, I will set my Kelvin temperature. I'll jack my Kelvin temperature up to like 8,500, 8,600. And then I can see what is going on with the color of the sky, and I'm not going to do it in post-production. What you'll find out from me is that I don't love post-production. It's my photojournalism background where we could not change things in images. Ethically, I can't go in and change the color of an image, right? So as a photojournalist, being published, I can't take things out of an image. Everything has to be done in camera or as a crop. Fixing a horizon, that kind of thing is fine. Basic color correction is fine. Density of an image is fine. But I prefer to get it in camera as much as possible. So when I'm breezing through my images and culling them, it's a quick process. Throw it into Photoshop, gone, next one. Same thing. If you watch me, and that could be a whole nother short tech talk, is literally my culling process, because I don't cull in Lightroom. I cull in a program called Photomechanic, and I'm very fast. If I'm going to get through 2,000 images from the first half of a basketball game, pop, 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 I've got to be really fast. And then when I pass something, I back up and go, oh, this one, boom, bring it up in Photoshop, crop it, fix it, caption it, send it to my editor. It's minutes. I don't spend hours on my images. Now, if I was going to do a gallery print or something, I would spend much more time on it. But, I hadn't shot raw in the 35 years I've been shooting, from film into digital. It's not been the last 3 or so years that I even shot raw files. I was JPEG forever, because shooting sports, raw files are just too big. There's too much information that I don't. It slows my culling process down considerably, and it's filling up my hard drives. Hard drive space is expensive. It's gotten a lot cheaper, but And I've got 72 terabyte RAID system that I have to store all my stuff on, and I don't wanna have to buy another $3,000 RAID system for quite some time, you know, so, this stuff I'm shooting raw, but none of my sports stuff is in raw. These I had to work on a little bit, just because, I didn't wanna blow the sun out, you know, it's always easier to pull information out of a shadow than it is to get information out of an overexposed ball of light or sky or something like that. So the overexposure images, as you probably figured out when you're going into your post-production, is really difficult to bring the information back from an overexposed image. So here I was underexposing quite a bit, so I could get the orange sun, and it wouldn't look like a white ball. And then I was able to get into the shadows a little bit and bring them up. You know, whether that was a gradient mask or something like that, just to bring up the shadows a little bit, and then you can kind of get into the highlights just to see some of the dust. But you know, that's the extent of it. It still wasn't more than 5 to 10 minute post-processing job on that, at the most. Any other questions? So Wes.
Where is that? Where was that taken?
This is in Utah. So I live in Park City, then there's Salt Lake City, which is about 25 minutes from my house. This is about an hour out of Salt Lake City. It's in the West Desert of Utah. So I've been taking people out to the desert for the last 5 years or so. It's on Bureau of Land Management, or BLM land. So it's federal. This is a mix of 240,000 acres of federal, some state, and a little bit of private land. And it's awesome. It's really cool. Dirty and dusty, and I miss the dust, I miss the dirt. You know, like here there's just no dust. Everything's wet. You know, so it's nice because inside the house there's no dust. You know, back in Utah, you know, where we live, it's high desert, so, you know, 2 days and we've got white dust off. So, but it's just, I don't know, it's just the whole feeling that you get while you're out there. So it's pretty awesome. This land borders a Army base, Dugway Proving Ground, so that is literally just kind of 2 miles to the right. So it's a no drone zone, basically, because Army would probably come out and shoot down. Not to mention it would be really bad for the horses. These horses are all wild. They've been there since the late 1800s in one form or another. So it's on the original Pony Express Trail. So, and one funny little thing about the Pony Express is it was only in service for 19 months, which growing up and you read about, you know, you learn about it in school, you think, oh my God, the Pony Express was all throughout the Wild West, you know, forever. It really wasn't. 19 months.
So who feeds them? It's desert. How do they get taken care of?
So, cattle ranchers lease the land to run cattle, and they pump in water. I don't know if it's spring-fed water, but there are watering holes out there. Most of them are not natural watering holes. There's like a concrete block or there's a trough. So these horses are pretty lucky, and they're a very healthy herd. There's about 200 of them now. At one point, there was about 500 horses out there. And about 4 years ago, they culled the herd. The federal government came in with helicopters, chased the horses in the pens, and took 300 of them out. And then they adopt them out to legal to send them to the glue factory, but who knows? You know, nobody's really policing that. So you'll see some, I think Robert Redford did a film on wild horses in the West. And there's a lot of advocate groups that go out for this herd because it's a very accessible herd. But there are wild horses all through Utah, Wyoming, Montana, Nevada, they're all over the place. But this is a really exceptional herd. So another device I use quite a bit when I can is reflection, especially if it was a boring assignment like I talked about earlier, you know, trying to come up with something interesting. So, you know, like a glass tabletop. One of the stadiums that I shoot in for the press box is like stainless steel and it's got these lines in it. So, you know, it's doing it over all the stadium. The lights hit it and do some really cool reflections in the stainless steel. You're going to see me with my camera pressed up against a plate glass window on an average, you know, whether I'm, let's say, walking around St. Augustine or something, you know, I might press up against the window to see if I can get, you know, a reflection of people walking around. There's a nice spot in like Arches National Park. Day after the rain, they have potholes. You know, might stick the camera down on the ground to get a reflection of the potholes. White pocket out in California is kind of like that. You know, the best time to go is after a rain, so the potholes fill with water, so you can have something that's a little extra creative. You know, a little bit more, adds a little bit more to your image. So at the top, we spent a month in Iceland. This is a mountain called Vesterhorn. It's kind of as you make your loop down to the southern side of Iceland going east. It's a black beach, and on a beautiful day, it's like a mirror. It's incredible. The water comes in, and as soon as it goes out, it just creates this really beautiful reflection. Now, we did 2 back-to-back trips. The very next trip was a total gray day. The mountain was covered in snow. There was ice everywhere, and I couldn't get a reflection. So you just never know what you're going to get. So then I was working on motion in the water, you know, something very different for the same exact spot. You know, I'm backed up, there's rocks, the water comes up, and as it goes away, so instead of getting the reflection, I'm looking for motion. These guys at the bottom are the salt farmers in Vietnam. The water's really shallow. It's barely, you know, a half-inch deep. Maybe not even that. I was just wearing flip-flops. And as the water drains out, they collect the salt. But it was a really beautiful day. Great clouds, because you'd rather have clouds compared to a perfectly good day. For most situations, but yeah, so now you've got reflection. And you don't, you know, so these are all wide angle. You could probably shoot some with long lens, whereas I tend to shoot a lot of long lens. Even landscape, I like landscapes with long lens, because I like compression, but these are all probably shot at 15 millimeter or so. I'm supposed to say scale. What happened next? So going to places where there's a lot of people, instead of bitching about there's people everywhere, I try to use people in my images to give a sense of scale. So having a tourist doing a selfie and almost getting pummeled by a wave gave me that one little extra piece of, you know, information in my image that, you know, sure, you can derive, but I like that person in there for scale. Same thing with this, the bottom. Just gives you a sense of how big the mountains are, how big the landscape is. And again, top left, you've got starburst, you've got silhouette, you've got scale, you've got motion. So that's what, 4 different creative devices in one image to show interest. Going the opposite direction with scale, you know, with scale is having a large, the person in the foreground showing very large, which makes the chapel, or the church in the background look a little smaller. But there, you know, you've got some leading lines, you've got silhouette, you've got some scale, little bit of motion. You know, I'm laying down the middle of the street.
I was gonna ask, it almost looks like you're below level.
Well, no, I wasn't below, but my camera's sitting on the ground.
Wow.
Getting harder and harder to do those shots. Double knee replacement. Top right, we're in an ice cave. It's really hard to just take a picture of an ice cave and show how big it is. This happened to be a really big one. My recent trip, we had to like duck under, and the helmets were hitting the top of the ice, so the entrance to the ice cave was considerably smaller, or small enough where some people didn't want to go in there because they were freaking out a little bit. This one had a very large opening. And in this situation, one of my he's a good friend now, but he's also a great customer, brings his T-Rex outfit on every trip. So I've got him in Bali, I've got him in Borneo, I've got him in Iceland, I've got him in Vietnam. So it's pretty funny. So I was like, all right, Carlton, you have to go up front, you gotta set up your tripod. So it gives you a sense of scale. It's, you know, silhouette. Otherwise, that picture would just look like a big hole, you know, there's nothing else to it. So, yeah, so that's kind of fun. So this is kind of what I touched on earlier about using potentially specialty lenses or using your aperture for a creative device. We all talk about compression or shallow depth of field. The top left photograph was shot with a 70-200. And you can kind of see, actually the two that you really see the difference. Let's see. This was with an 85, and that's with my 15-35. So getting in, you know, it's a different effect. There's a little distortion to the face. And it's funny, when I use wide zoom, a lot of times I'm at 15 almost all the time. I forget to zoom out to 35. 35 is a really nice focal length, even when doing portraits. There's just a touch of distortion. It gives you a little sense of something's off, you know, something's a little different. And when I'm doing portraits, especially with a wide angle lens, or when I'm photographing people, whether it was the fish ladies or, you know, people on the dock, I am holding my camera with my right hand, obviously, but I am like this. Like, I want to be able to reach out and touch my subject, because you get a sense of intimacy when you're, you know, it feels like, the viewer feels like they're in there with you, you know, compared to being way far back, long lens, compression. So it just has a little more personal feel to me. So I shoot a lot, really wide, and you know, I'm just kind of moving around. But on my street stuff, or you know, in public, I'll start long, 70-200. Got two cameras on me all the time. Shooting 70-200. I'm getting them used to seeing me with the camera, because I don't do anything secretive. I'm not, you know, I'm not, you know, like pretending I'm not shooting them. I just pick it up, and if they go, don't do it, then I stop. But if they're cool with it, you know, I might even point to my camera and be like, hey, I'm shooting this. But for the most part, I'm a big guy, bald white guy in the middle of Asia, you know, pretty obvious, right? Holding a big giant camera with a big giant white lens with another big camera, and maybe wearing a sarong, you know, because that's what we have to do to get in the temples. So keeping it pretty obvious. And then as I, you know, interact with them, talk to them, and smile at them, then I'm moving in with my wide angle, and I'm getting a little closer. And by that time, I'm in their face, and you know, I can seriously reach out. If that kid's close with a 35mm, I can totally touch his shoulder. Yes?
How often do you have to pay these models?
No, I don't pay anybody.
In many places, they won't let you.
there's a lot of places that are like that, and it's a shame. Now, that being said, there are some places, like the Vietnam trip was a little different because the guide had arranged some of the stuff. So, in a sense, they were paid ahead of time with the knowledge that we're coming out. But there's never money exchanged on the street. Because if they were to say, pay me, I'm out of there, I'll walk away. Yes?
The pair on the right looks like wide angle on top and telephoto on bottom, but the text says they're both 85mm lenses.
They are. They're just shot at a different distance. So there might be a little crop to it, but, you know, and a different angle. Like I'm a lower angle photographing her. And if you could see it on the computer screen, you could see every bit of makeup, every crystal on her face. That's shot at 1.6, this is at 1.4. But you can just see what it does to the background. So at 1.4 and 1.6 compared to shooting it at a 35mm lens with 3.2, if you were shooting that at 1.4, that whole background would be way more, you know, out of focus. But then again, now on the top at 200, at 4.5, it's strictly compression from using a long lens. So these are all, you know, specific to what I was trying to get.
But is that the same person in those two photos?
No, no.
Here's my problem.
No, different people and two different events. These were dancers that we, they're all dancers, but these were dancers that we had set up at a home that we went to. And these kids were getting ready for, we were there specifically, it was a specific time of year in Bali. It's a holiday, they prepare for a week or two for this holiday, and then they had dances. These kids were getting ready and we just jumped out of the vehicle and found them, and they were at school, and we just, you know, just walked in and just acted like we were, you know, supposed to be there, you know, and smiled at everybody, and everybody was great. So to whoever was asking me about paying, it's one reason why I love going and taking people to Bali specifically. The island is 80-some% Hindu. They're happy and friendly, and they have a ceremony for everything they do, including every body of water, every, you know, tree. There's a temple. You know, there's temples everywhere. So there's ceremonies going on all day long. Obviously, times of year there's bigger ceremonies, but they are not programmed to ask for money, and they're very welcoming. Walk right into somebody's home pretty much, and they welcome you in, and you can sit with them. As long as you're showing respect, you're not trying to go into temples without a sarong on or something like that. As long as you're showing them respect and they greet you with a smile. I mean, by the time you leave there, you're saying hello. Hello! You know, you sing it. And when you get home, your face is tired from smiling so much because it's relentless. It's amazing. It's an experience that you don't know you need until you do it. And I call it kind of a cultural and spiritual journey with your camera. That you're lucky enough to take your camera on. It's awesome. So anyway, that's my spiel about Bali specifically. One of my favorite places on earth. Perspective. Change your perspective. Go up high, go down low, put your camera on the ground, shoot on lens, get down low. You know, if you're photographing your kids, you're photographing your grandkids, somebody else's kids, whatever it is, get down to their level. Look at it from their perspective. It's a big difference than, you know, if you can't be on your knees, sit on your butt. Just get down low. And so that's my dog, Norman. The field was flooded, and, you know, you don't photograph dogs from standing at this level, because it just doesn't look great. The horse, you know, I even found a lower spot slightly in the ground so I could have that looking up, majestic look. You'd be surprised if you haven't tried it much. Changing your camera angle and looking at it from a different perspective changes the whole look. And there's lots of reasons to do it. There's to keep your composition clean. You know, I like to photograph things. I like my images to be clean. And when I say clean, not a lot of clutter. Unless there's, you know, you're at a crazy place and that's why you're using motion or something like that to change the clutter. If I was shooting this figure skating from ice level, what am I going to see? Anybody? Think about it. Advertisements. What else? Glass in the hockey rink, because most of them still have glass. Empty seats, right? All that crap. So by taking a long lens, going up high, shooting down at them, all I see is white behind them. You kept it clean, gave me a different perspective. And it's a better picture because he's looking up at her. You know, it's just a whole different vibe. These are, let's see, that one is shot. I'm standing on the nets and I'm doing this. You know, I'm not very tall, so I have a hard time with some of that. But, you know, I may have to crop the toes out, but it was worth it because it's a, you know, it's a whole different perspective than trying to get under their brim or, again, you saw it's the same spot as I shot the framing one and the silhouette, just a different person. But when I work a situation and when I go into it, I move around a lot. You know, if I just stood, like I said, with a tripod and stood in one spot, it's going to be very one-dimensional images. So I can go into a situation, I'm pretty good at going into a situation coming out with, especially if there's things going on, let's say 5 pictures. I'm trying to get a minimum of 3 looks. If I'm lucky, I get 5 looks. That way, if I were to put all 5 images on a page, it's telling a story, right? They're not all going to look the same. So I'm going to have something with their faces, maybe something with the frame, and I'm going to have something looking down at them, maybe something looking up at them. So I try and to show multiple looks from the same situation to give me all different perspectives. And also changes the light. Most of the time silhouettes you have to be a little low. Reflections you tend to want to be a little low. That's in Moab. That is the pothole that has water in it from the rain. I think that is anyway. That's one of our, you know, other guys in the group. So you got starburst, reflection, silhouette. You got a few different things in there to give you multiple looks. This is the incense factory in Vietnam. Now it's a tourist spot. We get there before the tourists show up. They have like catwalks that you can walk around up top so you can do the high perspective shots. So I'm not the first person to show up to this place and make that image. But they're out there, they're working, and you have multiple opportunities to try and make some really pretty pictures there. Again, in a set of images, when you're trying to tell a story, one of my 5 images that I might have could be a detail. And I use detail in my brain, you know, from my list of creative devices. What else can I do? You know, I only got 3 looks. What else can I do? Oh my God, look, she's peeling grape with it. You know, apparently she doesn't like the skin on the grape. She's just peeling grapes and eating them. That was in the market. You know, she's making little pancakes at the market. This was fascinating. You know, these folks that are fixing the nets because they put the feet in there and there's a method to it. She's not just sticking her feet into the net, but there's a method to how she was working her way through the nets when they were repairing them and then weights, lead weights out of the nets. And the fish, you know, it's ugly, but it tells a story along with the other story, with the other photographs for the story. You know, and the ladies were absolutely in charge on the docks. They come up with the pricing, they take your money, they throw punches. I mean, it was wild, you know. They didn't throw punches at me, but other people who were trying to, you know, hone in on their business, and so it was kind of wild. But anyway, just think about details when you're out, and that could be in the desert with a huge landscape in front of you, and it's amazing, and the light's great. You know, look down, turn around, look at the, you know, I don't do a lot of macro. In fact, I don't even own a macro lens. I don't really do a lot of macro, but I do like to get occasional detail. And again, especially if I'm trying to, my assignment for myself when I do these scenes on the street or the markets is come back with a story. So if I want to do a Facebook post, which is my marketing Facebook, you know, for my business, I don't want to just put up one pretty picture, you know, my gallery shot. I don't want that. Like, I feel like I'm at my best when I can show a series of images that tell a story. You know, and that's from my work at the newspaper when they would say, all right, well, from this event, we need 25 images for a gallery for online, you know. I want them all to be good. You know, I don't want to just spray and pray, you know, and here you go. I want them to be good. I want them to tell a story. I want to be able, there might be some repetition with 25 images, but I want to be able to, I want you to be interested in clicking all the way through 25 images. But, you know, for something like that, my assignment to myself is, all right, from today, I need to have a bunch of images that tell a story, and you're not going to be bored looking at it. So, detail is just one of those. Weather can be a creative device, right? Weather makes images. Beautiful blue sky, sunny days is generally not a great day to shoot. I mean, it might be a great day to shoot a ball game or, you know, certain things, birds or whatever, but weather creates interest. And it always made me laugh, like, especially in these games. Oh crap, it's snowing, I'm going into the press box. And I'm walking out to the field, like, you're crazy, look at this. How often do you get to shoot a soccer game in the snow? You know, I mean, seriously, it was dumping snow. When I went in at halftime to send my images, there was no snow on the ground. By the time I got out there, it looked like this, and it was awesome. If you could look, I mean, if you looked at that, the spray coming off his head from the rain, this playoff game in Cincinnati was just dumping rain. This day here, do you guys remember the picture earlier with the sea stacks with the sun coming behind and the girl doing the selfie? It's the exact same spot. Couldn't even see the sea stacks. So, just had such a crazy look to it that the weather helped create that image. The top two, shot from almost identical locations on two different nights in the middle of the summer when baseball didn't mean crap because the team was terrible and nobody really cares, but we have to be there. You know, and I know when to abandon shooting action. You know, I know that my editor trusts me to come back with something, and if it's not action, it's going to be something with some interest in it. So the storm rolled in on the hot August night or whatever night it was, and you know, the lightning came in. This was after a storm also, but it cleared up enough that the sun came out and the sky went crazy, and I took off. I actually ran up to the top of the stadium to shoot that as well. So, you know, I abandoned the action, and I wanted to shoot the scene. So I use weather as a creative device. And leading lines. There's two of them right there, leading lines. You know, at Forest Gump Point, that is the ultimate leading line, you know, to an amazing landscape. And then the other is a pretty cool leading line up in the church that I just happened to get in the way of. So, thank you all, really. Take my email down, you can always reach out, happy to answer questions, I live right down the road, not that that matters, but I'm here. Currently my website is down because I got mad at my provider and I canceled it, so I have to build a new website, but, yes.
When you finally you mad and when it costs you to work out, how do you come for a good price that you sell your picture? Sometimes you put a picture out that doesn't sell. I mean, what is the matter? There is no magic or margin that you could put to make the picture sell. I mean, what goes on in that area?
That's a really good question. I don't sell my images, so I don't know. Yeah, not currently. Maybe someday I'll start, when I feel like I've got a stash of images that I think are worthy to sell. I feel like I'm getting there. I'm starting to get bored of just shooting and posting. So I have printed some. I don't print much. One of my goals for myself over the next year is to learn to process for print, because it's very different than processing for the web. Have a final image for a print, big print, not quite that big, but a big, gallery print. But yeah, there are formulas, there are websites that can help you with formulas if, your image is this large and you're selling to a private person for their home, is going to be different than if you're selling to a doctor in their office. There's more eyes on it. The same thing when it comes to advertising. If I were to sell for advertising, the questions you have to ask are, where is it going? How long do you want it to run? How many people could be seeing this image? And, is this in perpetuity, or is this for 1 month, or is it for, so printing and framing and doing all that, it's expensive, so you have to make a certain percentage. You have to figure out what value that is that you want out of that. It's not worth it for me to, you said, oh, I really like that post picture, I want a copy of that, can I get a 1 by 14 print? And I might be like, it's really not worth it for the hassle for me to do it if you're not willing to pay $1,000 for it or whatever it might be, because it's work, time, value, money, whatever that value is. And the biggest problem with undercutting people or going cheap or shooting sports for free, which people want to do because they just want to be on the sideline. I don't back out of my driveway to shoot a sporting event for free. I don't even, also why I don't really shoot sports here in Florida that much. Because all the big sports other than the city Jags are in Orlando or Gainesville. And for what they want to pay for a sporting event, which is not much these days, I'm not driving 2 hours each way to shoot a sporting event. I don't care. I don't care if it's LeBron James. I don't care. I don't care. It's not worth it. Like, I'm not gonna do it for free. And the people who do it for free, just like, shooting a cheap wedding, you screw it up for the people who are trying to really make a living at it. There's a whole other conversation that we can get into. It can get kind of deep and it can, get kind of personal. But everybody, you all need to start somewhere when it comes to doing prints. Having it printed for out here is fabulous. There's beautiful prints out there. I think we stroll through, it's really nice. But it's worth it for you to spend the money and get it printed and get it framed, matted, however treatments you want. Because you know that people are going to see it. And you might either take it home and put it on your wall because it was on the wall here and it looked beautiful and you got comments, or you might want to try and just make your money back. It's all fine. It's just whatever is really worth to you. But to someone like me who 100% of my living is in photography, there's the time value of money and what is, I'm not gonna throw prints up and sell them cheap, because it's not worth it to me. Now there are, if I have my website set up, there's art storefronts that you can put on your website and it's automatic. But then I have the problem with, I wanna know what that print looks like, framed, or as an acrylic, or as a gallery wrap or metal. I wanna see it, I wanna hold it, I wanna make sure that the shop did a great job on it. So I don't want it ordered on the website, drop ship to somebody without me even seeing. So, whereas a lot of people are totally fine with that. And that's assuming that someone even wants to buy my images, that's a whole other thing.
You just say what the market is the best buy.
Yeah.
That's-
Yeah, no different than trying to rent my house, if it's not rented, for the last 3 months, then I probably overpriced it and gotta drop the price down a little bit, or if it rented right away, I might, probably could have gone up a couple $100.
So I'm gonna have to cut it off. One is Jeff said he was gonna go to Boosters, if anybody wants to ask more questions. And also, I wanted to say that when you get your website going, you'll have more information on your workshops.
Oh, yeah.
And Nancy, where are you, Nancy?
Nancy
left, but
Nancy
Nancy's
went
been on one of those workshops, which is fun. And so, yeah.
So you guys have been to the St. Augustine Bourbon Festival. A lot of you see Hunt's photo there. I do a lot of workshops for Hunt's. On the essence structure,